I'm going to continue on with Chapter 10, Means of Egress. This is a fairly important chapter, probably occupies most of the time AHJ spend. Chapter 10 of IBC and IFC are just about exactly the same. They correspond with NFPA 101, Life Safety Code. So this is all your means of egress stuff. Keep in mind, it's really important to know three principles as far as means of egress. There's three members of the means of egress: exit discharge, and exit access. So go back to the definitions and see those. Exit access basically is the distance or the path from anywhere in a building to an exit, and then you have an exit which could be 1 3/8 to 100 feet long, and then you have exit discharge, which is outside the building to a public way like a street or something like that. So let's take a look at a few things that you need to know what it is. That's a question right there: exit access, exit, and exit discharge. Ceiling height for the IBC commercial is 7 feet 6, except for mezzanines. It's different than IRC. IRC is actually 7 feet, so keep that in mind if you're used to the IRC. So let's see. Well, just take a look at it. I also want to point something out here relative to Table 1004.5. You will be asked something from this table, I guarantee it. But I do want to point out something interesting. If you look at business occupancies, business areas are 150 gross. Go back to 2015, this is 100. Between 2015 and 2018, this changed from 100 to 150 square feet per person. That was based upon General Service Agency survey in 2009 that found 150 more closely represented typical findings in government facilities. Now, the reason I say that is this is a minimum, okay? There's no reason you can't go to you can go down to 7 square feet per person as long as the means of egress supports it. And the ICC will ask you that. They'll ask you they'll give you like something, a airport terminal, let's say, and they'll give you so many size doors, and they'll give you a square footage. If you apply this table to that, you'll miss the question, because this table, the occupant load factors, OLF, occupant load factors, these are a minimum. You could always go to a smaller number, okay, and have more people in there. So, in fact, it even calls that out somewhere. I'm not going to take the time to look here, but if you look at section 1004, it'll actually tell you that it's a minimum, and you can always go to something lower. So it's not a big deal. I'm not going to waste your time. There it is right there. Increased occupant load. So just look at 1004.5.1 if you have a question on that. So let's jump through this. I want to make this short for just make a video for Chapter 10 itself. Spaces with one exit or exit access doorway. Now, 49 is a magic number. We'd have to go back Chapter 3, but you need occupancy signs for assembly occupancies if you're 50 or more, and in no other case. And that's based upon this table: one exit or exit doorway. But those occupancy signs, they apply to assembly occupancy specifically. But what I'm getting at is the trigger for a lot of other stuff is number of doors. So let's say you have a area with 500 square feet, but it has 2 doors. And let's say you're applying an occupant load factor of 100. Okay, so there's 100 into 500, that's 5 people, right? You don't have to have 2 doors, but you have them. But even if you have them, it still is not required. So some of the other stuff invoked by 2 doors is not required. So just keep that in mind. In any event, so for this instance, this case, I had like an apartment complex that had an occupant load. When you need 2 doors, that's when the occupant load exceeds 20 feet. Okay, so just basically know that 2 doors triggers more stuff, but also know this table. Important to know that. Yeah. Yeah, like my other videos, just highlight what I have, and you don't have to go through all the code to pass this test, but I promise you, if you highlight what I have, you're going to be a happy camper. Okay, so doorway configuration and placement. If you look at the commentary or even NFPA 101, you're going to have more assistance. They have some nice graphs and charts. I'm not going to go into that. The intention here is to go through this fast. But if you're suppressed, so let's say you have a building that requires 2 doors. So let's say it's a B occupancy with 50 people, okay? That triggers thou shalt have 2 doors. If you're a suppressed building, you look at the building, take the diagonal, and the 2 doors have to be placed no closer than 1/3 of the length apart. So like, you have a door here, you have a building here, your door's here, maybe, here's okay. But if you're non-suppressed, that it's half the diagonal. So let's say you're one unit, your diagonal is 1.4 units. So 1/2 is point. It ends up being 0.707 in this case, or 1/3. It probably confusing you, but the point is, understand there's a difference between suppressed at 1/2. Non-suppressed at 1/2, suppressed at 1/3. Okay, and it has to be, the automatic suppression system has to be in accordance with what that means is NFPA 13, or I think it's NFPA 13R. It gives you an option. When you get over there, you can see 903.3.1.1, I think is 13, and then 903.3.1.2, I think is like 13R or something. But in any event, most of the time, the exemptions are limited only to 2013, to NFPA 13, but this is one of those situations where you can apply different sprinkler standards and still have this apply. Okay. Okay, so means of egress illumination. It just tells you if you have to have lighting on your corridors. Basically, your means of egress: exit, discharge, exit access. 1-foot candle, a walking surface. This is not emergency power that comes over here. Emergency power is going to be less than that. So you have to have emergency power. Comes on within 10 seconds. We'll get into another section that talks about that. But take a look at this. Emergency electrical system. Spaces that require 2 or more exit accesses to exit. Emergency electrical systems are required for aisles, corridors, and exit access stairways and ramps. This is the trigger right here. So what I'm saying, that's why this is important to know. If you require more than 1 exit, only if you require it. It doesn't mean you have to do it if you have it. Because a lot of times rooms have 2 exits, even if they don't have to have it. But if you have to have it based upon occupancy, and you can use occupant load factors here, or you can use the number I mentioned before, something that provides more occupants than this. But regardless, whatever it is, if you have 2 exits, you have to have 2 exits, then you have to have emergency lighting. Okay, emergency power for illumination. That's the trigger that requires it. Directional signage. You basically have to see a exit sign. We're not there yet. It's in another place, but just be aware that you have to have some signage. Take a look at this. There's a bunch of stuff. Exit signs, areas of refuge have to have specific signs. Yeah, so this is talking about some area refuge stuff. Size of doors, 32 inches. You're going to see some difference between this and Chapter 11 of IFC in terms of what existing doors can be, but just keep in mind that for new construction, and this is clear width, so you have to have like a 34-inch door, 36-inch door. You can't have, that's actually your clear width through the door, so just keep that in mind. So Group I2, that's a hospital. You have to have wider doors as a minimum to be able to get, like beds through. So I2 has some different requirements than other construction. So keep that in mind. So side hinge doors, the requirement for them to to swing out in the direction of travel is the magic number of 50. So just keep that in mind as well. Unless you're a Group H occupancy. So. You will see business occupancies and stuff, mercantiles even, that don't apply this, and it's because they're under 50. So just keep that in mind. That's the requirement. 50 is the magic number for the door going and the means of egress, or the path of egress travel. Let's see. Yeah, 2% horizontal slope. Just look at that. Thresholds. Yeah, so this is a lot different than the IRC. Keep in mind, the threshold at a door, you can't go above a 1/2 inch unless it's like a sliding glass door, which is 3/4 inch. But 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch is the magic number. So you have a threshold on one side of a door, threshold on the other side of the door. You're not allowed to have the threshold of the door itself more than 1/2 inch above the landings. I guess I'm using the terms wrong. The landings. So landing, threshold. You can't be higher than 1/2 inch per the IBC. Like I said, it's much different in the IRC, so be aware of that. Hardware height. So this is for your doorknobs. Have to be within 34 to 48 inches. This talks about like, what do you call it? Delayed. You're allowed. Just look at that. That's going to be a question right off the test. This verbiage has to be on the sign if you have delayed egress for security reasons. Yeah, panic. So panic and fire hardware exit on all Group H occupancies. There's some other requirements. Assembling e-occupancy above certain numbers, 50 people. Have to have not just you can't have the turning door. You actually have to have the panic hardware. So this will be asked. And down here, as far as just keep in mind, the maximum unlatching force is 15 pounds. I was asked that. I think somebody told me they had a question about balance doors. So just take a look at that as well. Okay, so I1, I2, anytime you have like group home, care centers, hospitals, or even prisons, I3, it's not in that list, but it allows certain changes. If you have custodial authority over people that you're taking care of, you have to have allowances for some stuff. So just take a look at that. There's some different occupancy specific requirements here, but I've never seen anything outside of this. In other words, you don't have to know all the exemptions and stuff like that. Okay, revolving doors, stadiums. So exit discharge. There's some allowances for dispersal areas outside of stadiums. Stairways. Okay, let's take a look. 44 inches. If you're less than 50 people, it's 36-inch width on your stairways. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, it's normally 44. And if you're above so many stories, it becomes 48. So just keep that in mind. Stairways. It's 7 feet 6 for head clearance on stairways between the nose of the riser up to the ceiling. So keep that in mind. And then you come here, 7-11. We're not there yet, but the riser height can't be more than 7 inches and can't be less than 4 inches. So anywhere you're like have a rise of 4 inches or less, you need to be a ramp. But the point is, this is what you have for a what do you call it? Your stairway. 7-11 is a magic number. So the depth is 11. Now this is different than the IRC. IRC allows 7 3/4. So just don't get confused between residential through the residential code, which would apply to townhomes and regular R3s type thing. This is commercial. 7-11 is the magic number. And honestly, just about every residential home you're going to see 7-11 anyway, so it doesn't matter. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, R3 is allowed 7 3/4 and 10 inch for your tread depth. Winders are a little bit different. You're allowed 6 inches there, but anyway, you may be asked that on winding stairways, 6 inches rather than the 7 inches for, for 6 inches instead of 11 inches for your tread depth. Okay, this is a magic number, 3/8 inch. So I had to deal with this at work on legacy buildings several times. But 3/8 inch, it's fairly common when you're doing a stairway. All the stair riser heights have to be within 3/8. So they will ask you that on the commercial building inspector test. Just be aware of that. Stairway landings equal to the width of the stairway. Let's see, or 48 inches, whichever is less. So I think I had a question once. They tried to trip me up on that. Okay, it's more of a principle explanation, but keep in mind you're not allowed to store anything under stairways, period. Nothing under exterior stairways. If you're in interior stairways, thou shalt have a 1 hour rated construction and an entrance into understore storage from a separate location, not within an exterior enclosure. So just keep that in mind. Very strict on that. So a flight have you ever been in a building? They have like 2 flights for a given story. The reason is you can't have a flight more than 12 feet. They'll ask you that. Spiral stairway, you might be asked some of this stuff. Keep that in mind. Yeah, flights of stairway shall have handrails on each side. This does come up. Magic number, 3 or fewer risers within a dwelling and sleeping units in R2 and R3 do not require handrails. So keep that. That's an IRC question they'll ask you on the residential building inspector, but they'll ask you that here as well if you're doing in apartments or standard domestic homes. 3 or fewer. So you only need handrails if you're over 4 risers. Or excuse me, 4 or more risers. Let me get the terminology correct. Okay, I'm just going to flip through this. I want to make this quick. Chapter 10, as an HJ, really, if you're managing a facility, you're going to be asked about stuff from Chapter 10 a lot. It's worthwhile to concentrate on this and know this. So let me just, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through. You have the 4-inch rule. If you're familiar with this, what I'm doing, I'm assuming you have some reasonable familiarity with Chapter 10. I'm just showing you what my notes are and what some of the questions are. The questions I had are underlined, or the answers, they're underlined. So, like, you have to be able to see an exit sign within 100 feet of any place in a corridor, an exit access corridor. Look at there, exit access corridor, or exit passageway. It does not say aisle. Keep that in mind. So like if you're in an F1 occupancy or an S1 occupancy or something like that with aisle spaces, there's a lot more allowances. I talked to one of the authors of the code on this, one of the chair people for NFPA 101 about this way back when. But don't get caught up on it. Be very clear with the definitions. Exit access corridor, 100 feet. Some graphics on what the sign should look like. So let's just go through this. I just want you to see it. I'm not going to waste time talking too much more because maybe in a subsequent video I'll take individual pieces and analyze them and explain them. But for this, for your tests, I just want a video that shows the Chapter 10 answers. But do keep in mind your exit access travel distance. This is really an important table right here. Okay, so B occupancy, for instance, you're allowed up to 300 for suppressed. F1 occupancy is 250 if suppressed. Now that's total exit access travel distance, okay? So it's different than common path of travel, stuff like that. You have to be able to reach an exit from any point in the building within these numbers specified. But there's some allowances. Don't get caught up by not looking at the allowances. Take a look at this. F1 or S1, you're allowed to be 400 feet under certain scenarios. There's also some other stuff here to look at. Just bear with me for a sec. One thing I didn't talk about was common path of travel. Let me go back to the exit sign. You do need to know what common path of travel is. They did change it in 2018, but let me just pop this open, okay? Let's go back here. Common path of travel. This is, I mentioned, we looked at this before. This is spaces for one exit, but keep in mind the common path of egress travel section is also here, be aware, like if you have a B occupancy that's suppressed, sprinklered, you're allowed 100 feet. And what that means is, so on your exit access travel path, as you go into an exit door, you have to, every 100 feet section, you have to have an option for, you can either turn left or turn right, that kind of thing. You have to have, within 100 feet, I'm using a B occupancy that's suppressed in this scenario. Within 100 feet, you can't go more than 100 feet with having a choice in route changes. Even though you're meeting the exit access travel distance, common path of travel does come into play. And when I took the CBI, the Certified Building Official, the Commercial Building Inspector, I didn't see any common path of travel questions. Okay, so maybe they'll pop up. Just be aware that this table covers both 2 exit requirements based on occupancy as well as common path of travel. And that's separate. Common path is separate than total exit access travel. So be aware of that. Yeah, just look at my notes. Let's just slam through this. Corridor fire resistance. So this is going to correlate back with fire barriers in Chapter 7, but be aware that, let's look at a B occupancy really quick. If you have a corridor, and you are suppressed, you need you don't need any fire rating on that corridor. Okay, if you're not suppressed, you do. So just keep that in mind. Most of the time corridors do, and also look at your footnotes. So just keep that in mind. Now let's take a look at corridor width. This will pop up a lot. I try to, NFP 101, this is an area where NFP 101 is different than Chapter 10 in terms of allowable widths, but there are exceptions to this. So take a look. So normally, if you're more than 49 people, it's 44 inches for a corridor aisle width, okay? But the reality is, if you're less than 50 people, it's 36, but that's not always the case. There's some allowances that allow you to drop down to 28, but you just look at the code. But as far as the tests go, they're going to go to this, okay? They're going to actually ask you about this, so don't get caught up too much. But there are occupancy-specific allowances here, so don't be caught up. I had no questions on dead ends, but be aware that they talk about dead ends here. So let's see. Egress balconies, such as like in an R2, I think I had a question there. Penetration, so exit stairways and ramps. Yeah, if you have an exit interior closure, exit stairway enclosure, keep in mind, very strict for the penetrations into the exit enclosure. I think the question was fire protection systems are allowed. That's very common. I've seen that in multiple tests, in fact. Let's see, exit passageway. I mentioned before 1 hour rated construction from exit passageway. We talked about that. Has a very specific definition too. I mentioned on the last discussion, just keep in mind that has a very specific definition. We're not talking corridors here. This is different. So just go to the definitions, Chapter 2, and look at that if you need to. Egress courts have a very specific definition. Keep that in mind too. Look at that. Okay, we're going to wrap this up pretty quick, but I wanted to do Chapter 10 separately really fast just for reference for you. There's a lot of stuff here. In subsequent discussions, I will go through Chapter 10 in more abundant effort. But, okay, so I think it's worthwhile for 10:30. Let's see, 10:30, just bear with me. So 10:30 is assembly, okay, assembly occupancy. So you're going to have unique means of egress for this. And like, if you're doing a theater or something, and how they have the aisles, you have the main like ramped corridor, not aisle space, ramp corridor, and then off of that you have branch aisles, and with fixed seating. Keep in mind there's a formula attached to this. So I think the test question I saw was one of those, one of those branch aisles in a movie theater, single access branched aisle, it had 17 seats. And so what is the answer? The answer was 18 inches, but and that was for the aisle space, 18 inches for the aisle space, and use this to calculate it. So just be aware this is here. So anytime you have assembly stuff, assembly is going to be a little bit different. Go to 1030 to be able to hit this, okay? So ramped aisles, just always remember 1 and 12 for aisles, but you're allowed to go to 1 and 8 in movie theaters. There it is right there. Sometimes this has come up in past tests, but otherwise it's always 1 and 12. A ramp by definition is accessible ramp. ADA compliant ramp is always 1 and 12 to 1 and 20. That's the definition. Okay, last page for chapter 10, then we'll wrap up, but emergency escape and rescue, okay? So you'll get a lot of questions from this. IRC, this is more of like a fire code type thing, but just keep in mind that you need emergency escape and rescue openings in like, for all dwelling spaces above, what was it, below like 4 stories, I think is what the magic number is. Below the 4-story, there it is. Below the 4-story and above grade plane. Okay, so in the basement you need it, even though this is separate, but in basements and sleeping rooms, below the 4-story, above ground plane, you have to have an emergency escape and rescue opening. Okay, so what that means is a window that has a very specific size. If you're let's see. So 5.7 square feet, but it's different if you're up higher. So just be aware that the minimum size is 5.7 square feet, minimum net clear opening height is 24, and the minimum opening width is 20, maximum height from floor. So basically the window or your opening, whatever it is, you can't be more than 44 inches above the finished floor. So they'll ask you that on the test. And then the area wells, like in your basement. So basement will have the window, the emergency escape and rescue window, but it goes out to this window well, okay? So keep in mind there's a specific square footage required for the well size, a width specification, and you have to have a ladder, depending on, some parameters here. So just keep that in mind. So if you're covering your window well, you have to have it releasable and removable. Lots of questions from 1031. Just keep that in mind. These numbers are going to be a little different in the IRC for upper stories. Just keep that in mind as well. If you're used to the IRC, it's a little bit different. All right, so I think that satisfies it. Let's jump back into accessibility later. I'll do a separate video, and I have a separate test process for accessibility inspector and plans examiner, but which is A117.1. But we'll look at that later. But we'll just continue for commercial building inspector on a subsequent video and get through that. But I like looking at 10 separately really quick. I think there's some benefit. So forgive me if this was long and an unnecessary rant, but there's a lot of good stuff here. Highlight what I've highlighted, underline what I've highlighted, underlined, and you don't have to know the whole thing to pass the test. Just basically the stuff I highlighted. Okay. Anyway, I'll catch you on the next one. You have a good one. Thanks.